Hey, what's up folks, how's it going? This is Watch from MW Technology, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Apple Watch Series 10. I've been testing it out for the past couple of weeks, and it's better than ever. It has a larger display, and Apple has managed to make it thinner and lighter than the previous gen. For the past couple of years, Apple has been really dominating the smartwatch game, and Samsung and Google have been really lagging behind. But let's see how the latest generation Galaxy Watch 7, as well as the Google Pixel Watch 3 compare against the Series 10. First, we're going to take a look at the technical differences in terms of the design, dimension, the display, as well as the battery life. Then we're going to see how they perform in terms of tracking your fitness, activity levels, as well as health markers, and what they can do in terms of tracking your sleep. And then we're going to ultimately determine which smartwatch is right for me personally. I specifically use my smartwatch to do 6 specific tasks. We're going to list off those tasks, see how each one compares. So we'll see if we can dethrone the Apple Watch with all those tasks, and let's get into it.
Now let's talk about the size and dimensions of all these watches. The new Series 10 46mm version is about 10% thinner and lighter than the previous generation. The aluminum case weighs about 36.4 grams, which is actually heavier than the Galaxy Watch 7, which only weighs a measly 33.8 grams with the aluminum frame. And the Pixel Watch 3 weighs about 37 grams. In terms of thickness, the Pixel Watch is also the thickest at 12.3 millimeters, and both the Galaxy Watch 7 and Series 10 are exactly the same thickness at 9.7 millimeters. Once on the wrist, the weight and thickness doesn't really matter too much. It's more about the shape and contours of the watch face itself. And I do find that the Apple Watch, with its rounded off corners, definitely feels the most comfortable for me personally. Perhaps I'm used to it, but I do find, particularly with the Galaxy Watch 7, with its squared off design at the back, and especially where the strap joints or mounting points are, it does feel a little bit sharp, and that doesn't really feel too great on the wrist. The Pixel Watch is definitely a little bit more comfortable than the Galaxy Watch, and feels very nicely placed on the wrist. Now, when it comes to durability, the Apple Watch still comes in aluminum and titanium cases, with ion strengthening glass on the aluminum and sapphire crystal glass on the titanium cases. Both finishes are going to be fairly resilient, with the edge up going to the sapphire crystal glass being just a little bit more of a harder surface. And on the Galaxy Watch 7, with the aluminum case, you do get sapphire crystal glass, and on the Pixel Watch 3, it's Gorilla Glass 5, which is similar strength to the Ion X strengthening glass that we find on the aluminum Apple Watch. The water resistance on all these watches are pretty much the same. They can all go down to 50 meters deep for about 10 minutes at a time. Now, both the Apple Watch and the Galaxy Watch come in an Ultra variant, which will not only improve the overall battery life, durability, and water resistance, but also will probably double the price of what the standard watches cost. In most cases, if you don't want to flex on people, I think the standard watches are definitely durable enough and functional enough for day-to-day use. Now, let's move on and talk about controls. Now, one of the big standout features of the older generation Galaxy watches were the rotating bezel around the display. It's kind of a trademark feature. It was a great way to interact with the operating system in the watch and give you some sort of tactile response. Sometimes Samsung brings it back, sometimes they take it away. In this generation, it seems like they've taken it away, and there's not that option. You can still virtually scroll by just gliding your finger around the rim and have pretty much the same functionality, and there's a little bit of haptics to give you that feedback, but it's still not the same thing. Now, both the Apple Watch and the Pixel Watch actually have a digital crown on the side, which gives you a little bit of tactile feedback, something that's pretty important in such a small computing device, just to have some sort of physical controls to enhance the user experience. Now, last year, Apple added the double tap feature as a gesture mode control on the Apple Watch, so you can control certain aspects, take phone calls, pause and play music just by tapping your 2 fingers together. It's a cool way to interact with the watch without having to touch it. Samsung has added similar functionality to the Galaxy Watch 7, but it's still fairly limited in terms of how many things you can do on the Samsung side. You can take things like phone calls, resume playback, as well as take remote photos from your smartphone. But on the Apple Watch, for several years now, there's actually a whole suite of gesture controls that will allow you pretty much entire navigational control of the Apple Watch using the fist controls, the double tap feature, among many other things, to fully unlock the capabilities of the Apple Watch without having to actually touch any of the physical controls. Now, the Pixel Watch 3 is fairly basic in terms of its navigation. Obviously, you have the touchscreen, digital crown, and a single side button to do most of your functions with. It doesn't have any specific fist or finger gesture controls at this point, and it's pretty stripped down in terms of adding those extra features. Now, come back to the displays. All of them are using an OLED panel with up to 2000 nits of maximum brightness, great for outdoor usage, and all of them are super bright and vivid given you have the brightness set right. Resolution is around the same on all of them. You're looking at about 330 ppi on the Apple Watch, 327 on the Galaxy Watch 7, and about 320 on the Pixel Watch 3. Obviously, the Apple Watch has the largest size of display, just under 2 inch versus 1.5 inch on the Galaxy Watch and 1.4 inches on the Pixel Watch. Now, before we talk about the fitness and health tracking capabilities of all these watches, I do have to mention our sponsor that made this content possible. Now, I started my fitness journey about 10 years ago. I first lost over 70 pounds, and over the years, I've slowly gained about 40 pounds more back on. That's in order to get stronger and to increase my lean muscle mass. Now, I still do a ton of cardio on a daily basis to maintain good heart health. However, exercise is only really half of the pie when it comes to overall weight loss and general health and fitness. What's probably more important is your diet and overall metabolic health. Now, these smartwatches are great, don't get me wrong. They track all your fitness vitals, activity levels, heart rate, etc. But they don't actually know what's happening inside your body. That's where Lumen comes in. This is a small, tiny device that you breathe into every morning, and it gives you an exact reading of what your body is using for energy, fat, or carbs. This is something that no smartwatch can do. What Lumen does is measure your carbon dioxide levels in your breath. Lower CO2 levels correspond to higher fat burning, and higher levels correspond to more carbs being burned. You get a number from 1 to 5. That not only gives you a reference point of what your body is using for fuel, the system will also give you tips on how to optimize your metabolism for fat burning, or more importantly, become more flexible in using both fats and carbs for weight management, improve mental acuity, fitness performance, as well as better sleep. Now, Lumen syncs to your smartwatch or fitness tracker and understands your day-to-day activities, sleeping habits, and after using it for a couple of days, it'll give you what's called a flex score. Higher scores from 15 to 21 indicate that your body is good at using carbs for energy, but most of the time, the body is using fat for fuel. I'm at 13.5, which is medium flexibility. That means I have a good mix between fat and carbs for energy, but if I want to lose weight and optimize my fat burning capabilities, I probably have to lower my carb intake in addition to being in a caloric deficit. Now, the thing I like best about Lumen is that it's not just about losing weight or even trying to promote a low carb diet. It's about actually giving you a way to monitor what your body is doing from a metabolic perspective. You can use it as a reference point, just like you would a weight scale for what your body is doing at a particular time. Plus, if you're a performance athlete, this is a great way to check to see if you actually have enough carbs in your system that'll give you enough fuel for your long run or deadlifting session. Now, if you're interested, go to lumen.me/MWTech, get 15% off, and try Lumen yourself. We want to thank them so much for their sponsorship. Now, let's get back to the topic at hand and talk about the suite of sensors that's available in each smartwatch. Now, all these have a heart rate monitor, the ability to take an ECG rating, to detect AFib, as well as detect the level of oxygen that's saturated in the blood. On top of that, they have temperature sensors, so they can monitor your temperature when you're sleeping, and obviously sleep tracking and pedometer, fitness tracking capabilities as you would expect. Now, there are two unique sensing capabilities of the Galaxy Watch with the native app support that is not available on both Apple and Google side. One is the ability to do a body composition measurement. This will give you a rough idea in terms of how much body fat percentage you have in conjunction with your lean skeletal mass. This is not going to be accurate, obviously, but you can use it as a reference point, and it's cool to have. On top of that, you can also do a blood pressure reading. Now, you do need to use an actual blood pressure monitor that's fairly reliable to set this up. You take 3 readings, and it'll give you an average kind of reading of what your typical blood pressure is associated with your heart rate. This is not, again, accurate. It is approved for usage, but you should actually use a proper blood pressure sensor if you do have underlying blood pressure or heart issues, but this is kind of a nice, again, reference point to have. Furthermore, with all these extra functions, there's a ton of third-party applications that's available for both Wear OS and Watch OS that will allow you some of these capabilities, because most of them are software enhanced anyways. So for example, on Watch OS, it has a built-in hearing monitor that will monitor environmental noise, and if it gets too loud, it'll give you a warning. And that's something that's exclusive to the Apple Watch right now, but there are third-party applications on Wear OS that will give you similar functionality. But keep in mind that they're not going to be running in the background all the time because they're not natively supported. Now, in terms of tracking your day-to-day activity and fitness, all these watches pretty much at this point have the same functionality. You can select from the same number of workouts. They have live coaching for running and cycling. And for me, honestly, I don't require a ton of information or metrics when I'm on my jog outside. I just need basic pace information, GPS data, and my heart rate. And all of these do a great job of monitoring that and then corresponding it to their specific health apps, which is the native fitness and health app on iOS, S Health for Samsung, and with the Google acquisition of Fitbit, the Pixel is integrated with that ecosystem, which was probably one of the best third-party fitness trackers out there. And with each health app ecosystem, you have respective live and pre-recorded workout programs. You can follow specific meal plans for weight loss goals, as well as track your day-to-day activities apart from your individual exercises that you've done in the past. Do I personally prefer one app ecosystem to the next? I really don't think so. I think once you're in the Fitbit, S Health, or Apple Health ecosystem, you're going to adapt to it and become used to the whole architecture and layout. All that matters is you follow something and stick to it. Now let's talk about probably one of the biggest growing segments of the fitness tracker world, and that is sleep monitoring. Obviously, all these smartwatches have the ability to track all the levels of sleep from deeper to lighter levels, including REM and when you're awake and not awake. Now, for many generations, the Apple Watch completely ignored sleep, and pretty much you had to use third-party applications to track your sleep on the Apple Watch, but that's not the case anymore. With the native sleep app, it monitors all the different levels of sleep and obviously integrates with your bedtime schedule and everything like that. Now, because Samsung was ahead of the game when it comes to sleep, they actually have an excellent suite of features, including snore detection, which is not available on the Apple Watch or on the Pixel Watch, which is definitely nice to have if you want to know if you snore. On top of that, you have sleep apnea detection, which again, Samsung was first to deliver. But just like the Series 10, it does take a little while for that feature to roll out to all markets. So for example, here in Canada, we still don't have the ability to use sleep apnea detection on both Samsung and Apple Watches at this point. But I can guarantee you I probably have sleep apnea, because if you're over a BMI of 27 or above as a male, you probably have some sort of mild sleep apnea. And it doesn't matter even if you're very lean, under 10% body fat, and at that higher weight level. Weight is weight. And the way these smartwatches measure sleep apnea symptoms is they take a reading of your oxygen levels in your blood. If your saturation levels go below 94%, 5 or more times in a given hour, that will give you a clear indication that you have high blood oxygen variability, which might lead to some sort of symptoms of sleep apnea. What a CPAP machine does, it gives you a constant feed of air forcefully down your throat pretty much to make sure that you're getting an even level of O2 to keep your blood at a relatively healthy level. Now, interestingly, even though the Pixel Watch 3 doesn't have official sleep apnea support, it does measure your O2 levels in the blood while you're sleeping, so you can get actually notifications if the variability goes too high, and you can kind of detect if you have certain symptoms of sleep apnea, but it doesn't officially support it because, again, it needs FDA approval, and that hasn't been gone through on the Pixel Watch side. Now, for me personally, ironically, I definitely would love to have some sort of sleep tracking capabilities, but unfortunately, I'm very uncomfortable wearing a watch on my wrist while I'm sleeping, and it was pretty challenging to make this test in order to test out all three. As you can see, I didn't get very much sleep during this night because I was pretty uncomfortable wearing these dang things. But if you don't mind wearing a watch on your wrist while you're sleeping, it could be a very valuable asset. But for me personally, I'm going to have to find another solution to track my sleep. Now, moving forward, let's talk about probably the biggest weakness of the Apple Watch Series 10, and that's the battery life. It's still using a very small battery, 308 milliamp hours, which is significantly smaller than the 425 and 420 that the Samsung and Google Watch use respectively. The realistic real-day operation time is around 12 to 18 hours, and if you use the Series 10 in low-power mode, you can get potentially 36 hours, although I've never been that lucky. And on the Samsung side, you can easily get 24 to 30 hours with the always-on feature, and if you have the screen off, you can get up to 40 hours in low-power mode, and on the Pixel, you can get up to 24 hours of day-to-day usage with always-on display and 36 hours in battery saving mode. Now, charging the Apple Watch and the Pixel Watch unfortunately uses their proprietary connections, which can be kind of a pain, versus the Samsung uses a universal Qi charger. So although you could use the built-in charger that comes with it, you can also charge it on any wireless Qi pad, which is definitely a lot more convenient way to charge.
Okay, so now let's talk about the 6 most important things I do on a day-to-day basis on my smartwatch, and we'll see how all of these fare. The first thing is getting notifications from the phone to the smartwatch. Pretty much all of these watches do that in a timely manner. They do it quite reliably, and I really don't have any complaints across all the platforms. So they're pretty much tied in terms of just getting basic notifications from the phone. Now next, let's talk about taking phone calls. I think the Apple Watch Series 10 definitely still has a big edge up over here. Not only is the microphone better in terms of noise reduction and overall call quality, but the speaker on the Apple Watch is a lot louder and greater in terms of fidelity. I found that especially the Pixel Watch 3 had a pretty quiet speaker and the quality wasn't that great. I would put the Galaxy Watch 7 over the Pixel Watch, but not by a huge margin. And I think in terms of taking calls, not to mention going from voice chats to other Apple Watch users, the Apple Watch is superior in terms of the communication aspect. The other thing I want to talk about is replying to emails and text messages directly through the watch. This is another advantage of having that square display on the Apple Watch side. If you're using the on-screen keyboard, it's a lot easier to type on, although it's still pretty cramped, but definitely better than the circular displays found on the other watches. So if you're doing a lot of email replies or text message replies and not using the internal voice dictation or through voice and using the actual on-screen keyboard, this is still an advantage on the Apple Watch. Next, I train every day, so having something that tracks my workout is pretty darn important, and all 3 of these watches definitely do that job fairly sufficely. In terms of the heart rate accuracy, I think the Apple Watch is a little bit more consistent and reliable, and the other big thing I found that if you're auto-initiating either a run outside on a treadmill as well as cycling, the auto detect for that workout is a lot more reliable on the Apple Watch compared to the other 2. But besides that notion, you have pretty much the same variety of exercises that you can select through the watches, in addition to having pretty good metrics on each workout mode. So for example, if you're running, you get excellent data on GPS information as well as your pace, cadence, overall effort level, as well as specific metrics for running itself in terms of your stride length, contact time, etc. Moreover, since all these watches are now monitoring your effort level and have a history of tracking your physical abilities, they'll let you know if you're significantly under or overtraining, which can be a valuable asset. Now, the 5th thing I do is specific to owning a Tesla, which actually allows you to control pretty much all aspects of the car just using your smartwatch. A few years ago, Tesla released their API for third-party developers, and there's actually quite a few applications available both on Wear OS and Watch OS. And I actually found in terms of the library selection, there's a lot more free options to get pretty much the same functionality on Wear OS compared to Watch OS, which is mostly paid applications. So if you're in it for the value aspect of things, sometimes you can definitely find some excellent Wear OS apps that have pretty much the same functionality as paid Watch OS apps. Obviously, this is going to be a case-by-case basis, but the general app library is significantly larger on Watch OS. But for most basic functions, you're probably going to find a comparable Wear OS platform that's free or reasonably priced. Now, the last and perhaps the most important function I use on my Apple Watch specifically is the Spotify download function. And recently, Wear OS has finally upgraded its app where you can now do the same task, where you can actually download podcasts, music, as well as audiobooks directly onto the smartwatch and listen to it offline without the use of a smartphone. You can pair any Bluetooth pair of headphones and go on a long hike or run and not have the phone in your pocket. If you have wireless headphones that are also waterproof, you can also swim doing the same task or go on a sauna. It really does free you quite a bit from the smartphone, which is perhaps one of the objectives of a good smartwatch. The only downside of the Wear OS platform, at least with the Samsung and Pixel variant, is that you're only getting 32 gigabytes of internal memory versus 64 gigabytes on the Series 10, and unfortunately there's no expandable memory, which would have been really nice as well. Now overall, I think in terms of the functionality aspect of things, pretty much all of these watches will track your sleep, track your activity levels, and track your workouts, on top of giving you basic notifications and things like that. The design of the Apple Watch and obviously the integration between hardware and software and the overall ecosystem is still second to none with Apple, and I think just the factor of being a square screen really makes it more of a mini smartphone than a traditional looking watch. I think the circular displays definitely looks nice, but it has some functionality drawbacks in terms of displaying important information, and especially if you're perhaps even gonna use your smartphone less and less, I think the Apple Watch is certainly more capable in terms of doing that task. But really on that, guys, that's really it. I think for me personally, I'm still gonna stick with the Apple Watch, but if I had to pick between the Pixel 3 and the Watch 7, I'd probably go with the Samsung Watch. It's just better integrated and has more functionality, plus better overall performance for me personally. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you've liked and subscribed and have post notifications turned on. And also check out Lumen in the description down below. We want to thank them so much for their sponsorship. We'll see you real soon in the next one, and take care.